You're listening to the Becoming Zesty podcast. We are Megan and Dr. Alex, and we're so happy that you're here.
We are passionate about accelerated transformation, yours, ours, and the collective.
Personal and professional for coaches, practitioners, and leaders of all kinds.
Between the two of us, we seem to have done things the painful way. So let our pitfalls become your stepping stones. We are not afraid to share our raw and vulnerable truths in order to help you transform your thinking, your body, your heart, and your soul.
Combining over 15 years of functional medicine with brain-based habit change to lead you to create the life of your dreams, supporting yourself through all four bodies, physical, mental, emotional, and energetic, every step of the way.
We are transformation accelerators, wholeness cultivators, empowerment experts, speakers, authors, mentors, and change makers for a more loving world. By combining Dr. Alex's MD experiences
with Megan's mindset magic, we've helped hundreds of thousands of people transform their lives, and we can help you too. If you're ready to accelerate your transformation and have so much fun doing it, then stick around. We've got you covered. Quick reminder, this information is not meant to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor, not this doctor, before making changes. Now let's get into today's episode.
Hello there. Welcome to the podcast. It is Megan here. I just finished interviewing Julie Menanno. So she is the author of a book called Secure Love, and we got to dive deep into relationships and attachment. And I was laughing at myself because the way I learn is when people share personal stories. So I always want to ask my personal questions. And you know, one time, it's amazing. The brain recognizes, right, that one piece of negative, what we perceive as negative feedback. I got the feedback. This was very early on, though. This is probably 4 years ago now, maybe more. I got the feedback that I asked too many personal questions when I was interviewing someone. It was about mold, so I was asking a lot of personal questions. So ever since then, I can hear it in the back of my brain, just hesitant, like, is that too personal? Is that too much about me? So I was just laughing. I did sprinkle in a good amount of things I wanted to know. And since many of you here have been along for the journey and you heard the relationship podcast where Nate and I shared our honesty journey, and you heard the one about where I found out he'd had an affair and how that led me to deep healing work and NLP. And so you're on for more of the ride. Here we go. More of the inner workings of Megan's mind, whether you like it or not. I got Julie's book and I really, really enjoyed it. I read all the parts that I read very, very quickly. So it was an easy read and there's some very tangible things in here. I'm just going to read in here about the book. So Julie Menanno is a highly sought after couples therapist and relationship expert. She has an amazing Instagram, so go check it out. Lots of stuff on there. I love pages like this where you can just stop and listen one after another. So she provides insight and advice for couples it's at The Secure Relationship on Instagram with more than 1 million followers, it says. Wow. Okay, so Secure Love, the book, is a crash course in understanding how you show up in a relationship and diagnosing the negative cycles that trap you and your partner. So Menanno teaches you how to establish a secure attachment to create a lifelong bond. And I even got her opinion on the show Couples Therapy. Anybody watched it? I loved it. Started it on the airplane one time, and then I actually bought Showtime. I bought Showtime for the month just to finish that series. It helped my husband and I a lot. It brought up a lot of just good talking points and things I would have never thought. So I cannot wait for you to get into the interview check it out, please. You know, we really do love when you message us. So DM us on Instagram at Becoming Zesty to say, what did you like about the episode? What resonated with you? You can send us an email, support@becomingzesty.com. We love that too. And always a huge tip for us when you leave us a review on iTunes. It actually helps more people, all of the people who are looking for this, who are actively looking for the support and the content in the way that we provide it, because there's a million things out there, and the way we do it, it's going to resonate with someone. So if you know someone, please just shoot them a text, send them this episode, send them a different episode, leave us a review, all the things. We super appreciate it. We love you. If any of you are ready to jump in and actually come do our 7-day certification in person, we have, as of this recording, 2 spots left in April. That might be gone by the time this goes live. And if not, then we've got lots of options for October, and then we do it every April and October. So 7 days with us where you'll get to really understand deep everything we talked about today, the patterns that we have with partners. What we do is we go in with hypnosis, quantum time technique, NLP, and rewire that. We rewire those beliefs. And then you get to do the work in real life with your partner of actually talking it out. The cool thing is then you have the tools of, hey, I just went into full fight or flight, or hey, this just dropped me. This conversation is triggering an event from when I was 4 years old. And you would have the tools for that. You'd have the tools for you. You'd have the tools to help someone else with that. You can make an amazing career out of it. We have, or you can use it for your family. You can use it for your health. I don't know, manifest a lake house, whatever you want. Okay, let's get into the episode. All right, well, welcome to the Becoming Zesty podcast. I am excited to have a special guest here with me, Julie Menanno, who is the author of, for those of you seeing the video, Secure Love. So I devoured the book, loved the book, and cannot wait to talk about this with you today, Julie. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Okay, so let's just start with a little understanding for our listeners, those who have not found you. You have an amazing Instagram page with lots of details, and that's a great place to start to get to know you. But can you just tell everyone like what lights you up about the topic of relationships? What led you here? Just a little backstory on that.
Yeah, I mean, the short version is that I had 6 children, was staying home with them, really motivated to be the best mom possible, and figured out, hey, something's really missing here. I didn't grow up in a home where, emotional support was the thing. And I didn't know how to do it with my kids, but I felt the void. I felt the loss of it, and that was really painful for me. And I don't want to paint myself out as, the worst mom in the world, but there were definitely some pieces that I was trying to figure out. I was reading every parenting book out there, and nothing was really resonating with me. And I really needed to go do something, just have something for myself. I was home with 6 kids. I was sort of, to some degree kind of going crazy. So I went and went back to grad school. I thought, I need to just figure this all out from the beginning, this whole, human psychology thing. Really quickly into grad school, I discovered attachment theory kind of on my own, and I just started devouring it. And I started thinking, wow, this is it. Like, this is really the closest that science has come to explaining how relationships work. And I had no interest whatsoever in being a couples therapist at all. I just wanted to work with individuals. Then once I graduated, I had to work with some couples to get my license. Worked with one couple, thought, wow, this is really hard. I just got eaten alive, but I could see how this could be really kind of cool, if I knew what I was doing. I remembered from grad school learning about emotional focus therapy for couples created by Dr. Sue Johnson. That really kind of resonated with me. So I lived in Los Angeles at the time, hopped on a plane, a week later, found the first EFT training that was happening in the country, and it happened to be in Bozeman, Montana. That week, I fell in love with EFT and I fell in love with Bozeman, Montana. And a few months later, my husband and my 6 children and I moved here, relocated, and we love it. And from that time forward, I haven't taken on an individual as a new client. I fell in absolutely head over heels in love with couples therapy, because what I realized is that you can really profoundly heal an individual by working with them in the context of their relationship, because that's where most of their stuff is coming up. You're really getting to see a lot of the person and in their, with their partner with them. You're really seeing where are your buttons, where are your reactions, what's coming from the past, where are your communication lapses here. And another thing is that I was bonding with my individual clients and creating this really emotionally supportive relationship that I was very highly trained to create with clients. You have to do that to be able to create enough safety for them to want to, self-reflect and make changes. So I was very good at validating. I was very good at being curious, and all of these wonderful emotional support skills. And then they were leaving me and going out into their real life with people who had no idea how to do those things. And that was really hard. I hated seeing that. So for me, working with couples gives me the opportunity to create that between the two of them instead of just between me and the client. Obviously, I think there are many, many wonderful things to be said about individual therapy. But for me, doing couples work just feels like a very complete way to work. And now I am the happiest person in the world because I have the greatest job ever. And it's helped me have amazing relationships with all of my children and my husband. So.
Wow. So that having that couple, it's like you have that mirror always. You have that mirror back to you at all times when you have another person.
Yes. Yes.
So then it's like you're getting both people on board, or at least they're hearing the same language, to then take the container that maybe just used to be the therapy. Now they get to bring that home. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Yes. They're learning, what I'm providing to them via my relationship, which is hearing, understanding, emotional support, non-shaming, empathic. It is, it's wiring them to be this with each other. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on, but it's just kind of bringing a lot of emotional safety into their life that many people have never experienced before, ever. And, getting them out of these negative communication cycles that you have read about at length in my book. And one of the ways that I help them get out of negative communication cycles with them is just initially not getting into negative communication cycles with myself and them, which is very common in couples therapy, because it's triggering. It's really triggering work, for the therapist. So layers of it is layers of stuff going on with couples. It's just what I love. It's super challenging and it's super rewarding.
So would you get pulled in the beginning in a different way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't get pulled in anymore, very rarely. But yes, I think every therapist who's, learning, whether it's an individual or a couple, is definitely going to get pulled into cycles with their clients. And part of, becoming a real master therapist is to learn how to really not do that. And you really need to be able to not do that if you're really going to help that person grow. And if you do it, then you have to repair it. And that's okay too,
I definitely want to talk about repair today. So good. So important. So is your goal, I'm just curious, is the goal to stay neutral? I'm sure there are situations where you really agreeing with one party more than the other. Is that?
Very, I'm looking at what's happening underneath the surface. So I'm really looking at helping them communicate in a safe way with each other, and then have conversations about kind of the details of who's right or who's wrong. And so I'm really not going into those areas. It's very easy when you're just working and with someone's emotions not to agree or not agree. It's really not my job. It's my job to understand, to hear, to help them make sense of, and to help them communicate to each other. There are situations, very not common, but there are times when I think, okay, one partner is really kind of more of the problem here. But most of the time that is not my experience. Most of the time it's pretty even, even if it looks like one partner, is like big and loud and expressive and saying the most horrible things ever. Usually they're both playing into it in very different ways, but equally.
Can you tell us, Julie, what is the most important thing to understand around the emotional focus therapy? Can you just give a real high level?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing to understand is that they're in a conversation that's getting heated, where one partner is protesting and the other partner is defending and stonewalling, and the other partner is blaming, and the other partner is starting to shut down or counter blaming. There's so much going on underneath the surface that they're not talking about. So they're really only talking about like a tenth of the problem. So we're missing 90% of the actual problem. Even if we do manage to sort of band-aid that 10%, it's not really addressing the real root of the issue, which is insecure attachment. It's vulnerability, it's shame, it's loneliness. It's all of these fears and feelings that are going on underneath the surface that partners are really trying to talk about, but they're using, why did you put the keys in the wrong place? Or why don't you agree with me about parenting? Or how come you always pick the restaurant? They're using those conversations as code. Not that those conversations don't matter too, but there's always a part of those conversations, if they're fighting, that are code for all this attachment gunk, which is, are you really going to be there for me if I need you? Do you really appreciate me as a partner? Can I ever get it right for you? And so I need to help people have that conversation too.
What's under we always say in our work, it's like the presenting problem is never the problem.
Exactly.
So yeah. It's like, what is actually under the problem?
And if the presenting problem is a problem, we have very different ideas about whether or not we want a family, then we will never be able to actually have a real conversation about that until we address the bigger problem, which is how we're communicating and what we are and are not talking about.
Okay, I would love to get into the attachment types, although I think probably this question, I'm guessing, will lead into some insight to that. One of the patterns that I see is that people will actually feel, some people, the pattern of feeling really unstable when things are actually good. Or maybe like the belief that like the fights or the chaos bring connection. So for some backstory, Julie, I shared recently on this podcast here, my honesty journey. My husband and I went through this radical honesty process of like dumping everything on the table, from everything we'd ever not told each other, physical things and emotional, every aspect of it. And we shared that, and it was a really, really intense process. And we've noticed we had shared so much stuff that was like, you're probably not going to like me after I share this. And we were so much closer afterward, right? We had really bonded. It was super vulnerable. That's awesome. And we both have noticed it's like been a few months, and now we're like, oh, it's just kind of back to this. It's almost like we needed that chaos to bring the excitement or the connection. We're like, well, we don't really want to have those kind of conversations to be connected. But there's a pattern there with our attachment styles.
Okay.
Does that call out any specific pattern to you? Is this something that you commonly see?
I mean, what I would say is that, why aren't these conversations? I mean, usually throughout life, we have triggers coming up in the relationship, anything from, my husband and I just went on a trip together, and we very rarely travel together for a week, which is how long we were gone because of our kids. It's hard to be away, for both of us to be away at the same time. And so it created all these opportunities to decide just where to go, what to eat. It created all these opportunities for decisions. And these little decisions I started to realize there's so much attachment meaning around these little decisions. I mean, my husband would do these things where, I would say, "Oh, I'm going to go over here and look at this, statue." And he would say, "No, come on, let's go." And for me, it was like, wait a minute, why is he saying, "Come on, let's go"? Like, do my needs not matter here too? And it turns out once we talked about it, we were able to kind of meet each other and figure out that's not what was happening at all. He was just trying to get us to the hotel on time so we could get to the next place on time. But point is that there's always these little ruptures going on throughout the day, little misunderstandings, little drops that may or may not be misunderstanding or drops. And if we're not talking about those things, at least enough of the time, then we're not kind of getting down into those little micro wounds that happen throughout the day and talking about them and having that bonding experience. Or we're not, what is it that you're not bonding over throughout the day or throughout the week that all of a sudden you're feeling empty and disconnected and you're needing to have these big dramatic moments to come back together. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that well?
Yeah. So you're essentially saying we could do it every day on a smaller scale, right? As they come.
As they come, I'm never a fan of, hey, you have to process every little thing. Sometimes we just have to give each other the benefit of the doubt. But, any kind of miss or drops is an opportunity to get down into some vulnerability and bond. But then we're also needing to bond over good things, closeness, joy, sex, talking about our day, talking about other things in life that brought up some vulnerability, that we can share with each other and validate each other's emotion and comfort ourselves emotionally. And so I'm not trying to diagnose your relationship, but that would be my first question is what's missing here that you're needing to make up for by having these really dramatic bonding moments. And,
Right.
and again, there's so much stuff that could be going on. So I'm just kind of parachuting in here. But
yeah, no, it's okay. I'm very open with it. We withheld information for like 18 years, so that's what's missing.
and you know what? Another piece is that a lot of times these conversations aren't over in one conversation. They need to be ongoing. We need to talk about it, take some time to process what came up, have another conversation, take some time to process, and they start to heal more over time. It's kind of like grieving. Like if you lose someone that, is really important to you, at first you're going to cry and cry and cry and cry. But you're never just going to stop crying all of a sudden. It's just the crying spells are going to get fewer and farther between. And sometimes healing conversations, in fact, I would say all the time, healing conversations happen in that way. It's a big one. And then we follow up and then we follow up. And then eventually things just start to kind of be healed and we don't have to keep readdressing it.
So when we're repairing those ruptures, is there anything really important to consider other than just the open communication and seeing the other person's sides and validating their feelings? What else is really important to actual repair?
I think that, the quality of the conversation, are you able to have the conversation in a safe way where you're not feeling shamed? You're feeling, like you said, validated and heard and understood. You're not switching topics, switching from my feelings to your feelings to my feelings and going off on tangents that start opening up all sorts of other topics, right? You're staying kind of on a topic and one person's feelings at a time. And then, of course, any behavior change that needs to happen, because all the conversations in the world aren't going to matter if the behaviors that created the wounds are still ongoing. So, I address this in the book, which is, this is, how a healing conversation needs to take place. And again, sometimes, or I'm going to say all the time, or the vast majority of the time, it's multiple conversations.
Okay, let's talk about the attachment types, because I know in the book it said something around like, why do we have the same fight over and over? And I know that resonated with a lot of people listening.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like, Yeah, it's the same thing in a different format over and over and over.
It really is. I mean, if you're talking about a problem in a negative cycle, you're not going, it's not going to get resolved. Nobody's system is regulated enough to actually come up with some sort of creative plan to solve our problem. And you're harming each other emotionally and creating now new problems and new reasons to mistrust and new reasons to not feel emotionally safe. So then it just takes on this, life of its own of we have all these issues around parenting or finances or whatever, that aren't getting tied up. So they keep coming up and begging to be resolved. And then B, now we have to talk about our relationship a lot because we're both feeling insecure, not knowing, if our needs matter to each other, if you're going to really be there for me, if you can appreciate me or emotionally validate me. And so not only are you talking about the surface issue, but you continue trying to seek reassurance emotionally. And it creates this repetitiveness. And so the way out is, well, we've got to first of all figure out how to become secure with each other, how to become emotionally safe. When we're emotionally safe, we can have these conversations outside of negative cycles where we're regulated, we're hearing each other, we're supporting each other. And from there, we can resolve our differences over time. So we don't have to keep talking and having all these big blowups about money every 2 weeks. We can actually start to find our flexibility with each other and start working with each other as a team. So the anxious partner, let's just say in any relationship, we need two things, right? We need more than two things, but just for simplicity's sake, we need to resolve and work as a team together. We need to live a life together, and we need to have emotional closeness. And so what happens is we have the anxious partner who kind of takes all the responsibility for resolving the problems and all the responsibility for maintaining the closeness. And then we have the avoidant partner who's over there taking all the responsibility for not getting into these big fights and all the responsibility for not getting too enmeshed, too much closeness to where we don't have selves anymore, right? So there's no balance there. It's two people in these really rigid roles. And so one person is kind of, we got to get this resolved. We got to get closer. We got to get closer. And the other person's going over here playing defense, going, we got to not fight about this. If we talk about this, we're just going to get another fight. And we need to have like our own space too in the relationship. And whenever we can move people into secure, they're both equally taking responsibility. Both of them have a sense of, we need to be working as a team. And both of them have a sense of, we also need to work through our problems without getting into these big fights, or we both need to have closeness. We both have a need for closeness, but we also both have a need for not being enmeshed with each other and kind of maintaining our separate identities so that we can come together, as a whole, a healthy whole. Does that make sense? There are a lot of different ways to explain anxious and avoidant, but I think, one of the simplest ways to say what I just said is the anxious partner is fighting to close the distance, and the avoidant partner is fighting to keep things stable and keep things from getting worse.
And is it most likely you're going to have the opposite, the anxious with the avoidant, or would you also have anxious with anxious and avoidant with avoidant? What's the...
It's definitely, you're going to see anxious and avoidant together, whether they come together like that. Maybe for the most part, I think people do. It's a balancing act. If I'm overwhelmed with my emotions, it feels safe to find someone who is very quote unquote emotionally stable, which if they're avoidant, that actually means they're emotionally disengaged, but still it can be real balancing. If I'm avoidant and I'm completely emotionally disengaged, it can be very convenient to find someone who is holding all the emotions and will take responsibility for the closeness. So it's kind of a convenient pairing, even though it doesn't really feel good. It's a second best option. And if two people don't come together with those ways of being already entrenched, they're probably going to create it together. Two anxious partners is too much energy. It's too much fighting. It's too much, too much, too much. A lot of systems just can't hold that much energy and they dissolve. And if you have two avoidants coming together, who's fighting for the closeness? Nobody. And it's just kind of becomes dead. Are there couples that get into those patterns? Sure. I don't see a lot of them. I mean, the people I see are very clearly in anxious avoidant dynamics. And it really is, a balancing act of energy. It's about energy balancing. If two people don't come together who have inner balance, right, and create a balanced relationship because they both have inner balance, then they're going to try to balance each other out. One's going to be this extreme, one's going to be this extreme. And they find balance by kind of the hole in his head, or I'm sorry, the peg in his head fits the hole in hers kind of a thing.
Oh, I see. And
Yeah.
it is the same thing that the anxious style would need to get to secure. Is that the same as the avoidant, or do they both need very different things?
They both need different work. I mean, both of them need the same end goal, which is I can use my emotions and feel my emotions and talk about my emotions and access my emotions in a way that informs me and helps me connect with other people. But I'm not flooded by my emotions. I'm not letting my emotions completely drive the car. I'm not just emotionally emoting in these big ways all of the time, in ways that kind of hurt my relationships, right? So the anxious partner, we need to bring them down. We need to get them more regulated. Like, let's get out of that emotional dysregulation and into your body in a way that, your prefrontal cortex is more online when you're feeling triggered, in your best interest. So you can, instead of pushing your partner away with all these big emotions, you're able to kind of invite them in. And then with the avoidant partner, I'm wanting to get them more emotionally engaged. Let's get you talking directly about your feelings. Let's help you access them in your body so that you can start to become emotionally available to yourself and to your partner, because you can't validate your anxious partner who desperately needs emotional validation if you don't have any connection to your own emotions. You just simply can't go there. You don't know what it even is, right? And if you're an anxious partner, you're not going to be able to invite your avoidant partner in to help you with your big emotions if you're pushing them away with blame and criticism and such.
Yeah. And so most of us grew up without emotions, and talking about emotions was not a thing, right? Right. It's like
I think so. Yeah, for sure.
many people. So just even acknowledging that it's okay to have emotions, feel emotions, that you're not. A lot of people will say, I feel weak if I have emotions, or like there's a lot of different ties to that. So is that an important, just the education around these are your emotions to start with?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for avoidant partners, especially, there are a lot of messages that they received, even before they could speak. This stuff starts to get entrenched, from day one, really, how we are emotionally responded to by caregivers, So for those with avoidant attachment, what they get the message early on is showing emotions is going to get you ignored. It's going to get you shamed. Shamed. It's going to get you accused of being weak. It's going to get you punished, so it's like, what's the point? Why have emotions? Why talk about these parts of my bodies? So it's better just to kind of shove it all away, cut it away, and then try to kind of get my emotional needs met indirectly in all these kind of sideways ways throughout life, be successful, get it right. Yeah, so the avoidant partner really needs to now start getting new messages, which, hey, there's some value here. There's a lot of success that you can experience in learning to talk about all these other real parts of your humanity that are already there. We don't get to opt out of emotions, they're already there. And there's a lot of value in learning to find that part of yourself and communicate about that, and being able to get help with these parts of you and help others, your partner, with these parts.
It's beautiful. So in your book, Julie, you talked about the 4 C's of attachment, which I think was really helpful. So comfort, connection, cooperation, conflict, right?
Yeah.
So can you just go and share a little bit more about that, of how that applies in a relationship.
Yeah, I think it's a good way for people to kind of organize where their weak spots are, right? So we have some couples who, they're really good at connecting. They have, they do have these emotional conversations and can connect emotionally, and they have a great sex life. But when it comes to cooperation, that's when they're not getting it, right? One person, they have different, ways of parenting. They have different ways of keeping the house clean. They have different ideas about who contributing financially and all of these things. And so that's their blind spot, or that's their area for work, is to have healthier conversations around how we cooperate and work as a team together in life. Some couples, just the opposite. They work great as a team. They see eye to eye on parenting and in-laws and all of these things. But then when it comes to connecting, they don't know how to emotionally connect. They don't have a lot of intimacy. Maybe they're struggling in their sex life. And for them, that's where they really need to focus their energy. And then comfort, these are things like coming home at the end of the day and having had a bad day at work, or having had a hard conversation with your sister, or losing an animal. And it's like, how are we responding to each other? Is your partner saying, hey, you should look at the bright side? Or, oh, come on, you're being irrational? Or, you just need to not let this get to you. Or are they able to kind of just sit with you and go, oh my gosh, I get it. That sucks. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm right here. How can I help support you right now? And that doesn't mean that we don't give each other advice around life or try to pull each other up. It just means that we don't lead with that. We comfort first, and comfort and soothe, give people soup, right, when they're down and sad. And then later we might come in and say, hey, I have some ideas on this. Can I share some advice I have to give you?
Awesome.
So it's really that part is just about really kind of making sense of our weak spots. Yeah.
And then you can kind of look through each category so that you can communicate with each other on how do I want to be connected, or what is comfort for me? Like, can start to
Yeah.
speak that.
Yeah. Being
to
very
them, like,
clear. Yeah. Direct signals. I'm always going for direct signals.
direct signals. I like that. My husband and I have a lot of good jokes from years of therapy. We're like, well, what I heard you say was like, that's a constant thing, which has become a joke, which is great because then we can have more complicated topics. We can,
Well,
make them a little
jokes,
lighter.
jokes are joyful, and joyful is bonding. So that's great.
Right. Right. It definitely.
Just we're being defensive and not feeling. And yeah, we can go in
Right.
all sorts of directions with that. But in general, I think couples who joke with each other are amazing.
I'm just guessing, are money and sex the biggest hot topics for couples, or what? Where do those fall?
That's